The north of Argentina, where 200 years ago, this country declared independence from Spain. 2 centuries ago, the debate here in the city and across Argentina was over what system of government this new country would adopt. One proposal was an Inca monarchy, but it was a federal system that was agreed on.
History has become here in Argentina an important thing, how to rethink the nation. I also relate that with the crisis we had before, because as a citizen, sometimes you need to make that relationship between past and present.
As Argentina celebrates the bicentenary of the independence wars, celebrations have provoked debate about the country's history, as well as the more recent history, including the economic crash of 2001. And this city is at the heart of that debate.
The history of Tucuman, it's very important from the whole country. I think that the museum also, the idea is to think, to make, I don't know, to have a few ideas about the past and the present, because you cannot separate the past and the present.
Just as Tucuman offers clues about the country's past, it also offers clues about the country's present and its future. It was this city that gave warning signs ahead of this year's national elections. In August, ballot boxes were burnt during the vote for the provincial governor. This was the police response to protests. The national government candidate won by a large margin, the result ratified after a legal battle. In the complexities of local politics, officials from the 2 leading parties were arrested over burning of ballot boxes. But what happened here cast doubt over the forthcoming national elections. Weeks after the provincial elections, there's still tension in the city. Across Tucuman, there are political slogans, some denouncing fraud, others denouncing an attempted coup. And outside the provincial government house, this protest.
Fue simplemente una casualidad nuestra protesta que se dé justo en el momento de las elecciones y del bueno, tan comentado fraude que hubo en la provincia.
In 12-hour shifts, producers camp outside. They say the drop in international prices of their products, together with high taxes, means many producers are going bankrupt. This protest echoes a major standoff between the agricultural sector and the government from 2008, which brought the country to a standstill.
A partir de ese conflicto que fue largo, se quebró el diálogo con el gobierno nacional. Realmente es una cosa llamativa porque el gobierno nacional obtiene la mayoría de su fondo de las retenciones de la soja y puede llevar adelante algunas otras políticas gracias al sector agropecuario.
Protests and conflict between strong economic sectors and the government, Tucuman provided a snapshot of the country ahead of the elections. It is the end of an era, 12 years of Kirchner governments coming to an end. The legacy is on view, the length and breadth of the country, from street names in the south, to hospitals in the north, to cultural centres in the heart of the capital, Buenos Aires. The surname has left its stamp on the country. With the Kirchner governments, there have been high levels of participation in politics. Rallies here often have an atmosphere usually found at football matches. Mariano has been active in politics for several years. Here he was taking part in an event to try to block privatization of a public park in Buenos Aires.
Uno de los ejes en lo cual se construyó el kirchnerismo, que es la recuperación de la política como herramienta de transformación de nuestra sociedad. El creer en algo, volver a creer en algo, porque los que éramos jóvenes en la década del 90 y que ya teníamos militancia anterior, terminamos escapándonos de la política porque no le creíamos a nadie.
Mariano forms part of one of the many groups that supports Kirchnerism and is campaigning ahead of the elections.
Lo que está en juego es lo que estuvo en juego desde el día de nuestra independencia, o mal llamada independencia, si se quiere, es otra discusión, del 25 de mayo de 1810. Hay dos proyectos de país en pugna, en disputa, Uno es el conservador en lo político y liberal en lo económico, que es una característica de la derecha argentina. Por el otro lado, el proyecto de país, que es el que nosotros queremos, que es el proyecto de país nacional y popular.
In 2001, a political, economic and social crisis hit Argentina. 2 years later, the country still reeling, Nestor Kirchner won the presidency.
Nobody knew who Nestor Kirchner was. Nestor Kirchner was the governor of a Patagonian province in Argentina, quite low profile.
Kirchner was part of a wave of left-leaning governments in the region. They won elections with their stand against neoliberal economic policies of the 1990s. It was known as the Pink Tide. Critics called it populism. In 2007, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner succeeded her husband as president. From the Peronist Party, they were said to be the Clintons of South America. But 3 years later, Nestor Kirchner died of a heart attack.
But I think that was a defining moment. You know, Nestor Kirchner died in October 2010, and the government took that opportunity to turn him into a very important historical political figure for Argentina.
Sovereignty has been one of the central pillars of the Kirchner governments. Lobbying for negotiations over the Malvinas or Falkland Islands has been at the heart of foreign policy. Economic sovereignty was also on the agenda, with an ongoing struggle against speculative investment funds. There was a strong accent on human rights, and there were historic trials for crimes against humanity committed during the last dictatorship. And social rights were expanded too, to create a more inclusive society. But so too there has been strong opposition. There have been large anti-government demonstrations over high inflation, currency exchange restrictions, the handling of certain events such as the train crash that took the lives of 51, as well as widespread allegations of corruption against high-level officials. Earlier this year, this mood was compounded by the suspicious death of the prosecutor Alberto Nisman, who alleged a cover-up of the country's worst ever terrorist attack. His death is still under investigation, his allegations about the president rejected by 3 different courts. Increasingly, there was a feeling here that society was divided by those who supported the government and those who opposed the government. Enrique Perusotti and Carlos Gervasoni co-edited a series of essays analysing what the government has labelled the one decade.
The 80s, you know, in the 1980s, Latin America had a very rough economic decade, and we refer to that as the lost decade. The government took that expression and started saying, well, this has been for Argentina the one decade.
Gervasoni said a combative style has characterised the Kirchner administration.
That has been a hallmark of Kirchnerism, you know, a very confrontational style from day one. They picked up fights with the media, with businessmen, with countries, you know, with Spain, with Uruguay, with the United States at some point, with England, you know, with the IMF. You know, they identified, I think, objects of people's rejection, like, you know, foreign powers, IMF, the military, and they fought this.
Enrico Perusotti said the divide is seen most clearly in the media.
If you turn on the TV or read the newspapers, it seems you are reading, you know, news from different countries. So I think the journalist camp was the most polarized, and I think that gives the process of polarization a greater visibility that really has in society at large.
Carlos Raimundi is a national deputy who says the Kirchner governments have opened people's eyes.
Lo que hizo el kirchnerismo en estos 12 años fue sacarlo de ese lugar y ponerlo visible, hacerlo visible. Y entonces hoy la gente distingue entre un gobierno y el poder real. Y se da cuenta que lo amenaza no es el gobierno popular, sino que es el poder real, el poder financiero, el poder mediático. A mí me parece que esa batalla cultural es un rasgo fundamental de la identidad de esta década, de estos 12 años de kirchnerismo.
I asked about this idea of the growing divide that has developed.
Mentira, mire, no, esa es otra cosa.
He said it was a lie and that it was slander and accusations from the opposition. There are three leading candidates to win the presidential elections this year. Now, if we take the results from the primaries as well as the latest poll results, Daniel Scioli has a commanding lead. The question really is whether or not this will go to a second round or whether the government candidate will win in the first round. Now, chasing him is Mauricio Macri and Sergio Massa, and the way in which they're both trying to win votes is really conditioned by the fact that Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner will be leaving office with a high approval rating. Before taking over as Buenos Aires provincial governor, Daniel Scioli was vice president to Nestor Kirchner. He's been aligned with the government, but is viewed as a more moderate leader. Daniel Scioli has worked to lay out his credentials as the candidate for continuity, furthering the economic model that has placed workers at the heart of the discourse.
Este es el debate de fondo, o la economía popular del círculo celeste y blanco, o la economía concentrada del círculo rojo.
His advisors say that he'll bring in investment to the country, so if elected, Scioli would face the challenge of appealing to foreign investors as well as his support base back home. Across the political spectrum, younger generations have become more involved. The conservative Pro Party was founded after Argentina's 2001 crisis by Mauricio Macri, whose policies in the city have been resisted by Kirchner supporters. 26 years old, Pablo Siveri is one of a group of youngsters handpicked by the party for training in speaking and political formation.
Buscamos erradicar la mala palabra de la política. La gente tiene un concepto de la política muy mala y en realidad los malos fueron los políticos o los gobernantes que tuvimos en este último tiempo.
One of the overriding themes at these elections is that of a country that is split in two.
Está muy dividido el país, la sociedad. De hecho, se han peleado familias por opinar distinto. Y creo que ese va a ser un gran trabajo a futuro, gobierne quien gobierne, de poder reconstruir la sociedad y que, aunque piense distinto, no lo sientas enemigo.
Mauricio Macri's alliance is called Let's Change. His power base is in the capital, having been Buenos Aires city mayor for 8 years. He's viewed as more business-friendly and has been the main opposition figure in recent years. Macri laid out plans to invest heavily in infrastructure in the north, while tackle poverty, fight drug trafficking and work to unite the country.
Desde el gobierno nos ha propuesto permanentemente el conflicto, la división, la pelea, el atropello. Nosotros necesitamos realmente volver a escucharnos, porque por ese camino vamos a volver a crecer.
Outside this event, his supporters were convinced Macri represents the change the country needs.
I have faith in God, first of all, and my faith now is Macri, you know, because his proposal and his proposition is fantastic. His proposal is to change the country and to be with the people, especially with the poor people who need, in this moment, the help.
Trailing Macri and Scioli, but gaining ground in recent weeks, is Sergio Massa, a former cabinet chief in the Kirchner government, but who broke away to form a new party that put up opposition in Congress.
Hoy queremos ser el puente al siglo XXI. Hoy queremos ser quienes tomemos de la mano a cada argentino, a cada argentina, para encaminar a nuestro país rumbo al cambio justo, para ponerlo en la senda del futuro y del desarrollo.
Massa faced last-minute defections of top officials, but he's campaigning on taking a strong stance on fighting corruption and crime, and controversially, he also wants to militarize the country's war on drugs. He presents himself as a viable alternative to Scioli or Macri.
Es que no creo que el camino de la Argentina sea el ajuste o la impunidad. Hay en el medio una grieta que desde hoy la transformamos en la ancha avenida del futuro de todos los argentinos.
This month, Argentina held its first ever televised presidential debate. It was a highly controlled environment, candidates agreeing on the format, but not all candidates agreed to debate. Daniel Scioli declined the invitation, his camp saying they wanted to avoid further confrontation. His opponents sought to make the most of the opportunity. Compared to the past 12 years, the candidates in these elections are cast as more moderate figures, but the debate about the direction Argentina will take under a new government will continue.